Hey everyone, this video is a response to it's an article under the news heading from a publication called Torontoist, IST. I'm not real familiar with this publication. I stumbled across it, and the headline caught my eye, and then the content within, we'll get to that in a second, really made me feel compelled that I had to make a video about it. But basically, they cover news, culture, cityscape, politics, history, biking, environment, transit, LGBTQ, and newsletters. Those are the headings. This particular article, it's under the news section, right? That's the part that I found most disturbing. That's why I'm making a video regarding it. Headline: The warning signs of fascism on campus. Toronto has a long history of white nationalists using free speech as a cover for extremism. This is the disturbing part, folks, and this is where you really need to get on board and start to understand. Every time, the minute some publication, some media outlet, some political pundit, some ideologue tries to paint their opponent in this kind of manner, then you really need to question their motive and their narratives. You need to start first and foremost with having a question mark always at the forefront and present when you're reading this kind of nonsense. I'm going to read into the article now. Over the past several years, Toronto has seen a rise in far-right organizing, most notably the Soldiers of Odin, Pegida, and the Proud Boys. Likewise, university and college campuses have also been experiencing a rise in right-wing politics. So they're saying over the past several years. Now, like I've said in past videos, this rise of the, whether it's the alt-right or, like I said, and forget about the terms, the derogatory meanings that those terms they use to paint their political opponents with. But think about it. They're basically admitting it's completely reactionary, right? So just like any situation, you know, if you pick on people enough, right? So whether it's white people, especially if you're a white male particularly, if you're seeing that you're constantly, if you have an onslaught of people that are pointing you as being the oppressor and you recognize, wait a minute, I haven't done anything to anybody. Of course, if you have enough people and enough time goes by where people trying to paint an entire demographic such as white males as being the oppressors and everyone else being the victims, well, then those people that you were perceived or pointing out as being the oppressors, yeah, they're going to react eventually. And if you try to paint them that way without giving them any platform to present their own dialogue and their own narrative, then they're going to turn, some of them will at least turn to going against you full on, head on, and want to be just as ruthless in that particular endeavor, right? I see this as being reactionary, and now that I understand these kind of things and understand the historical precedents and many times where that has happened, it's like, yeah, like the rise of Hitler and those types, right? Or any of these collective regimes or these totalitarian regimes throughout history, that come as a direct response, as a direct consequence of actions prior to that. It's not that they just propped up out of nowhere, right? So understand that first and foremost. It's a college or a university. Shouldn't you have politics, right? If you're all about enlightening the human mind and the human intellect and expanding it, well, you can't be from one side of the political spectrum and try to paint people that are your opponents. I mean, think about it. Try to have a debate. Could you imagine having a debate in a university or college and you say, okay, this person that's going to represent the left side of the political spectrum, oh, they're great, they're benevolent, they're awesome, they're, holier than thou. But their opponents, oh, look at how evil and I mean, you've already distorted any chance of that debate playing out where, people are going to be at least somewhat objective in their approach or in the reaction from the debate. The minute you start any situation where you try to paint one side of a debate into a corner of being, vile or evil, then Well, I mean, sure, you might be able to overcome, some of these groups might be able to overcome all the negativity, but look at the burden that they're already having to assume before they've even had a chance to put forth and present their dialogue or their particular narrative, right? Students in support of free speech, founded at the University of Toronto, sounds good so far, right? If you're all about free speech, of course, hello, has been in the media due to their committed support of Jordan Peterson, professor, high-rolling Patreon fundraiser. High-rolling Patreon. No, he's just getting a lot of support. But is he a high roller? I mean, just look at with the videos. Look at the man doesn't live in the lap of luxury here. But see how this narrative's already starting out? And opponent of protections for trans people. And no, he's not an opponent of protections for trans people. That, once again, that's already a false dialogue. That's already a false narrative. Jordan Peterson has actually answered that question pointedly. And he said, it's not that I'm against trans people, but you can't force me. You can't use, the invisible gun in the room, right? Government, to bully me into saying words that I don't necessarily agree with. But it's not that I would ever go against the fact that trans people shouldn't have, be just like every other human being and be a protected person or individual, free from aggression, violence, and all that other things that freedom is supposed to entail. Jordan Peterson has never said anything contrary to the fact that he's all about promoting freedom. This support and their regular work with the Proud Boys, Rebel Media, the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, et al., has cast this burgeoning student group as the training ground for the future far right in the eyes of many. However, SSFS in the past week has been consumed with responding to a controversy surrounding notable neo-Nazi Paul Fromm. Fresh off of a spate of media attention from the White Nationalist Memorial for lawyer Barbara Kulaska at the Ridgeview Library in Toronto, Fromm spoke at a SSFS rally for the so-called Halifax Five. 5 disgraced military members who, as members of the Proud Boys, decided to disrupt an Indigenous ceremony in Halifax on Canada Day. Disgraced? I mean, that's in the eyes of the beholder, right? So, whatever. Completely political in nature, obviously. SSFS members now claim that Fromm should never have been allowed to speak at their event, or at least use their megaphone. While supporters of Fromm's attack them online over their false claims of misrepresentation, see these archive statements 1 and 2 and their current apology video for SSFS Changing Perspective. Like SSFS, Fromm is a known advocate for free speech, in quotations, having used his organization, the Canadian Association for Free Speech, to defend Holocaust deniers and hate mongers of all sorts. The Southern Poverty Law Center describes an earlier Fromm appearance on Fox News thusly. And then we know, hello, this Southern Poverty Law Center, once again, completely political in nature, right? These are leftists, what they're saying. So yes, of course, they're going to present a dialogue or a narrative in opposition to people that they perceive as their political opponents on the other side of the spectrum, right? So like I say, it's all completely political in nature. And what they really want is to suppress the speech. In any battle, this is what this is. It's a mental battle, a psychological battle. It's a battle for the minds of the masses. And what they're saying is we should be able to shut down the voices and paint them with derogatory statements so that you already, the burden is already on them, right? Screw the burden of proof that we have to prove they're bad. We need them to prove that they're good. That's what they're trying to do. That's what these political propagandists do. And look at them. They're showing, I'll show a picture in the description or in this video. I might impose it in the screen. Or I'll just show a picture of it outright. But yeah, look at how they're trying to paint these people as. Like I say, this is political dialogue, this is political narrative. This is propaganda at its finest. Free speech, in quotations, to the far right is often a veil to A veil held to obscure broader aims. In Fromm's case, this obscures his white supremacy, but should we take SFS at their word that nothing lies behind the curtain of their free speech argument? To some, that remains to be seen. But what if I had a cautionary example for giving campus groups such as this the benefit of the doubt? What if there was an earlier example which might provide some guidance here? Well, we don't have to look far. At the University of Toronto in 1967, as the anti-war and student power movements grew on campus, a reactionary counterweight arose at St. Michael's College. Thus, this group, founded by a young Paul Fromm, Don Andrews, and other future notables of groups such as the Western Guard and the Heritage Front, would serve as the training ground for the then future far right, the Edmund Burke Society. So once again, it's globalists against nationalists is what they're talking about. And let me tell you, that's the other thing. When all's said and done, when the shit hits the fan, you better believe that most people are going to turn to being more nationalists in their sentiment, in their reaction. But globalists think that they can win that war, right? They think they can destroy family values and nationalism and the concept of being part of a general group or larger community at large. They believe that they can completely twist and distort all those pretenses by using the globalist or world communist rhetoric. And you know what? I will admit, they've got some good sales tactics. They've got some good sales teams, and they've got a decent narrative and dialogue that does entice people to go along. Hey, what do you got against people over there, right? and that's against the nationalism stuff. But like I say, reject both of them, right? Become a critical thinker. And then you'll find, even if you are, such as people like myself, even if you are, not completely like, I'm not just nationalist for the sake of nationalist. I'm not a globalist because I don't believe everyone in the world. If you don't believe the people in your own country are good, well, you sure as shit aren't going to fall in line and think that everybody in the world is good, right? So, yes, if people have to measure in scale or in any scope, they're probably going to err on the side of nationalism or people that they perceive as being like them. You're not going to beat that mentality out of the human population anytime soon. That I'm very much assured of, and I've been paying attention to this stuff for a long time. One of the first mentions of the EBS in the pages of the campus paper of record, the Varsity, comes from a charming letter published on September 25th, 1967 by Paul Fromm, where he lambastes left-wing students and their support of international causes, right? So, like I said, globalism versus nationalism. Showing a little snippet from that particular headline article, and I'll read it. I, for one, do not want a single cent of my dollars spent on encouraging leftist troublemakers and draft dodgers. I am sure that many students do not want a vitric extremist and a member of the far-left Students' Union for Peace Action, such as Peter Warren, heading an organization which is supposed to speak for them. I am inclined to agree with the pamphlet being circulated by the Edmund Burke Society on campus to the effect that U of T withdraw from CUS. Wouldn't it be interesting if the shoe were on the other foot and CUS were to endorse Governor Wallace for president and issue a blanket support for apartheid in South Africa? Like I say, I don't know exactly what this person was trying to put forth or present back then, but let's just see where we're going to go from there, or where this article goes from here. Interestingly enough, Fromm and his colleagues would be engaged in outright support for the apartheid regime in South Africa through the EBS and the Canadian Friends of Rhodesia, another Fromm-funded group. At the time, their views on Vietnam were an early flashpoint with other students on campus. However, the Edmund Burke Society and Fromm were not satisfied with simply opposing draft dodging. Just days after the letter, on September 29th, Fromm was part of a campus debate in which he argued against the rise of communism, advocated for unrestricted bombing, and for the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam. The reaction from fellow debaters seemed to be discussed, with even Liberal Club members, Graham mounted, referring to the EBS as advocates of genocide. The EBS did not take too kindly to the repeated ribbings in the paper, though as they denied all such labels and portrayed themselves as average conservatives attacked by a political motivated paper. In a later article entitled Vietnamese Tricks and Violence, Fromm defended the position of EBS in counter-protesting in favor of the Vietnam War, which reached into two of his later positions. So I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below, but I'm not going to continue to read on it. It's a fairly long and extensive article. I suggest you do. But basically, once again, even then as it is now, it's globalism versus nationalism. And the best thing that you as an individual can do is reject them both in their most outright, far-stretched concepts, right? So if you're a nationalist, I mean, I would even consider myself to a certain degree. I mean, I am Canadian. My family grew up in this country. I have family across this country from one side to the other. And because I care about the people, not just in my family, but in the extended family, I guess, you know, just like with that tribe mentality, I recognize that, yeah, these are the people that we at least all grew up under this big giant umbrella, right? Whether we accept it, reject it, or anywhere in between, of what being a Canadian was all about. So, of course, or when the time arises where I have to defend myself against those I perceive as my fellow countrymen or foreign invaders, you know, that natural instinct is probably going to kick in for a lot of us, and we're going to become more nationalists in that regard. Doesn't mean, though, that you should ever, you know, accept people just because they call themselves Canadian and say, oh, well, there, you know, no matter what your personal ideology, or no matter how devious or oppressive or violent in nature you may be, oh, well, we're on the same team. No, never, 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 never accept that kind of premise whatsoever, right? Hold each individual to account, and to the same kind of standards you would to people in your family, to your friends, and people in your own small group or community. If you wouldn't choose to hang around with authoritarians, you know, forget about the color of their skin or where they, which geographical landmass that they prefer to identify with, or which flag that they prefer to identify with. Hold each individual to account. That's the most important thing we do. So reject the very concept, the very premise of this full-on unthinking nationalism, right? Blind nationalism. Reject that completely. But even more so, reject blind globalism. I mean, come on, right? You can accept people just like in your own personal circumstance, your own family life, or your own community. You can accept people that look different from you, have different ideological preferences, philosophies. But the whole premise always should be, are you trying to use violence, force, or compulsion against me? If not, if you have that let live mentality, then I'll accept you regardless of any background, your race, your creed, your culture. I'll forget all those other identifiers as long as you have that let live mentality. So reject the globalists, reject the nationalists, and always promote and show solidarity with the individuals, those who care and speak out in defense and in promotion of liberty. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.